I got to tell you that I was very impressed about the press conference yesterday and having some time to sit down with our new head coach, Joe Judge. That was the first time personally that I've ever met him. But when we decided and went with the hire that Joe Judge was going to be the head coach of our organization, I reached out to former players, whether it was, Matthew Slade or Rob Ninkovich. Everybody that I spoke to gave nothing but rave reviews about him as a man, as a football coach, being accountable not only to himself, the other coaches and the players around him, and that this was going to be an unbelievable experience for the players for the New York Giants.
And this is a coincidence, but Dave and I both in our salute to service
That's right.
here while we're doing this, and you kind of got that feeling listening to him. And, at the press conference off to the side, it was David Diehl, it was Richie Soibert, it was Justin Tuck,
Yep.
It was Jeff Eagles, and it was Amani Toomer. And Pat Hanlon made the joke during the press conference, you got a lot of Coughlin military vibes while you were listening to him make his speech and answer questions with the media.
I mean, the tonality of it was definitely something that rang home. The verbiage that he used was definitely something that rang home. And I think the conviction in what he was talking about and the confidence in the way that he was doing it and addressing it. There was no script needed. It wasn't anything that was sitting there predetermined or having any question in your mind that's going to come up and you're going to have just that standard answer and throwing out cliches. You could tell that he is an unbelievable communicator. He's well thought out about the process in which he wants to bring this Giants organization from stage one all the way to the end, and about winning football through discipline, through fundamentals, through being tough. If those things weren't the things that got Giants fans excited to listen to yesterday's interview, I don't know what would have, because everything that you hear him talk about, everything that he is about, the man that he is, those are all exemplary of the Giants way.
Now, Dave, I think from the outside looking in, people hear that stuff, punch you in the nose for 60 minutes, toughness, go out there, be dressed properly, stretch soft tissue injuries. People, I think, on the outside roll their eyes and oh, it's football cliches. But you're a player that's in the room that gets those messages. How do you think a team and a player reacts to that message from a coach and the type of messages that Joe Judge was sending yesterday in his press conference?
I think, number one, it should get them excited about the opportunity that's going to be in front of them, because like you said, everybody's starting from scratch. Everybody's going to have the opportunity to compete for a starting job. It's going to go to the best man that wins that job without having any predetermined conditions on what's going to happen, having any decisions made before. If you want to be on the field, work your ass off, and you will be out there as a starting player on this New York Giants football team. But the other thing that you hear out of them, there's a reason why there is a new head coach as your head coach right now, is because you didn't get things done over the last 2 years. And we know that when these changes are made, you know that you're going to be challenged as a man, as a player. It's going to bring out your best football through competition. And most importantly, you better know that you're going to be a part of the solution of what's going to happen around here and the winning ways of the New York Giants, or you're part of the problem and you're not going to be here. And, I've said this a long time, and I'll continue to say it. From the time that I was drafted in 2003, my first year under Coach Fossil, gets fired. Second year, Coach Coughlin comes in 2004. 2005, my third year in the NFL, there were 12 people left from my 2003 roster to our 2005 roster. That is it. That is the type of turnaround that happens when, number one, you know that you need to change the culture of a locker room, but two, the changing of scheme and the changing of guard. Some people can handle that competition. Some people can't handle that competition. But what does it do? Those fights, those battles, the competition, the way that you practice throughout the week and take it onto the game on Sundays, that's what makes the difference between winning and losing games, and having that mental toughness as a football team that we're going to stick together. We can look one another in the eye and hold each other accountable. And when those tough times happen, I know you're fighting just as much as I am, and the coaching staff is doing the same.
I want to get to that physical toughness and the potential live tackling in practice, something I've never seen since I started working here in 2007. But to your point on the roster, I feel like there's good continuity and consistency in messaging, and also priorities and a way you evaluate people between what we've heard from Dave Gettleman a lot over the past couple of years since he got here, and the type of things that Joe Judge said at his press conference and expressed over the course of the day. And for that reason, Dave, I don't know if we're going to have to see the type of turnover you just mentioned, because I think the type of players and people that Dave Gettleman has been bringing into this team over the last 2 years matches the type of people and players that a Joe Judge will want on his roster.
Well, absolutely. I think that that's a great thing that him and Dave Gettleman are along the same exact line. They're both football guys. They both feel better when they're sitting there grinding, watching film, breaking down players. And the thing that I love to hear Joe Judge talk about, and everything that I know about Dave Gettleman since 2003, it's not always about just numbers. It's not always about, oh, this guy had this 40 time. This guy benched 225 so many times. There's no bench press out on the football field. How does that player transition from what he is as a numbers, what he does well, what limitations does he have, and how do we put him in positions to succeed? And that's one of the things about Joe Judge being a special teams coach that is something that really helps in his evaluation of a football team, because you're dealing with 53 guys with complete different personalities. The wide receivers are much different than the linebackers, and you have to be able to communicate, get the best, and motivate those players the same exact way. And that also comes down to the evaluation process. We heard him talk about, is this guy a short burst guy? Is this guy a long burst speed guy? Is he got great hips? Does he sink? That was like listening to Dave Gettleman break down a player. And when both of those guys, Dave Gettleman and Joe Judge, are on the same page in evaluation in regards to the draft, in regards to the free agent, they're going to do what they need to do to put the best 53-man roster together and the best product on the football field to win football games for the New York Giants.
And to your point, it was also very Belichickian, where he discussed, and also very much like Parcells, where he discussed, I don't want to hear what a player can't do.
Yeah.
Tell me what a player can do. And then the onus is on that position coach or the coordinator or both to then take what the player can do from a athletic standpoint. You mentioned, is he good short area? Is he long speed? Is he strong, long arm, short arm? Tell me what he can do. Then it's your job to get the most out of the player. He's not going to want to hear coaches walk into the room and say, oh, this guy can't do this, I can't use him. That's not going to fly anymore.
No, definitely. It's definitely not going to fly anymore, because unlike college, you don't have a player for 4 years. You have the roster that you have, whether you're the offensive line coach, the defensive line coach. This is the room. These are the players that you have, and you've got to find, as a coach, which is your job, to bring the best and the strengths out of those players and try to cover up and manage the weaknesses by the players that you support around them and the type of schemes that you run. So that's the big thing that you always hear out of the combine. Well, this player has potential, but he can't do that. Why don't you go grab the potential and the things that he can do, and magnify those and put him just in that one position to succeed, especially when we're talking about a roster that can get valuable based upon versatility. There are a lot of players on this Giants roster that can do a lot of different things, but at the same time is putting them in all those different positions in the best interest of this Giants football team. Dave Gettleman and Joe Judge will be able to handle and describe and put them in those positions.
And we'll get to the scheme stuff in a second. I want to stick with the position coaches and the teaching, because one other thing Joe Judge said, and you pointed this out earlier, that every player has something different inside them that makes them tick.
Yeah.
And you have to understand each player and what motivates them. At the same time, every player learns differently. And I think those goes back to Judge's history in education. He almost has a doctorate in education.
Yep.
He's only, I think, a dissertation away from that. And he understands that some guys learn better in a lecture, verbally.
Yeah.
Some guys learn better by seeing it visually. Other guys learn better by going out on the field and walking through and doing it. And he made the point that it's up to the assistant coaches to go in there, and he doesn't care how you have to teach it, how many different ways you got to teach it. You have to know how to reach every player in that room. And I think that is a real valuable thing for a roster that's so young and still has a lot to learn.
Without a doubt. I mean, that's one of the things that you love about him. And once again, coming with that special teams background, some guys, when you get on them and you ride them and you're tough with them, they respond to that. Some guys need, hey, this is what you need to do, man. And they need a little coddling.
And he talked about having empathy for players.
Because at the end of the day, they still are human beings. They're not just robots out there. And the other thing, when you came up to learning aspect of me, in college, 5 years, I only missed 2 classes in my entire time because I'm a visual learner. I could read a chapter in a book and I can somewhat get it. I can hear a lecture and talked about it and I get it immediately. Same thing when it came to football. I could look at the X's and O's and I'm smart enough to pick it up with my football IQ. But the minute that we walk through it and talk about it, I got it forever.
Right.
And that's the difference with some players. Some players need that. Some players don't need that. But as a coach, that is your job. Your job is to find out the identity of each and every player in the room and put it in a maximized way so you get the most out of them and they're learning the fundamentals. But more importantly, when it comes to schemes, techniques, and all the things that it comes to with communication out on the football field, you know it's the best way to work with your group.
He talked about things like live tackling in practice. I don't think Tom Coughlin ever did live tackling in practice.
We would do it in training camp at times, whether it was inside drills, short yardage. We would do it in intermediate times,
and that was mostly early in his tenure, right?
Yep, early. But we would still hit. We would still be physical. Sure. And when it came to the running backs, it wouldn't be live tackling, take them down, but it would be hit up,
heavy thud.
Heavy thud. Like you're not running in and just doing one of these fake arm tackles. You're thudding and you're stopping contact without taking the player on the ground. And that's something that has time with practice, is being able to practice physical, but being able to practice physical in a smart way that is not going to injure players.
And you actually practice tackling that way.
Yeah.
You learn the technique. We see so much poor tackling now, and he did stress you have to do it safely, but he made the point, look, if tackling is one of the most important things in blocking, or the 2 most important things you're going to do on a Sunday, you have to simulate that the best you can in practice. Otherwise, what's the point?
Especially when it comes to offensive and defensive line play. When we talk about the NFL, especially over the last 4 or 5 years, throughout the first 4 weeks of the season, what does everybody say? Man, the O-line play isn't up to speed. Am I wrong?
You're right.
It's the truth, and it's across the NFL, and part of it is due to the way that they practice throughout training camp. If you don't have an offensive lineman go up against a defensive lineman in one-on-one run drills, moving a man from from A to point B up against his own will, you're not going to get it in the first 2-3 weeks of the season because it's something that you can't duplicate. So being able to do it in a controlled environment like he's talking about is something that is crucial and beneficial, especially when it comes to winning in the trenches.
And to that point, how can a coach ingrain in their team toughness and physicality? Because those are things you can't measure with numbers, right? They're things that are in here, and if you know football, you see that on film when you're watching. And it's easy to say, but as a player, how can a coach in his method and his techniques make sure players understand how vital that is and can actually make your team tougher and more physical than the other team you're going against?
Well, obviously, the message that you send, the attitude that you present, and the way that you do it day in and day out, so you understand that this is something that makes a difference and completely changes the dynamic when you're imposing your will on the other football team. Not every football team wants to get hit in the mouth for 60-plus minutes, and you see that starting to turn over.
So that is a real thing.
Oh, without a doubt. When you're sitting there, especially when we're talking about playing on the East Coast and Giants football, do you think defensive ends in the third and fourth quarter want to get bludgeoned by the run, or do they want to rush the passer? They all want to get after the quarterback. Right. They don't want to play the run for 4+ quarters. And now all of a sudden in the fourth quarter, those runs that may have been 2 or 3 yards in the first 3 quarters now are breaking off to 7, now are breaking off to 9. Now you have that big run because you've taken the will of that other football team. You see it in the playoffs. Who's moving? Who's changing the line of scrimmage? Are the defensive linemen's feet on the other side of the line of scrimmage, or are the offensive line moving them past that? Those are all things that you can quantify by watching film that numbers just don't show up. But all of a sudden you see it start wearing down a defense. And we used to love it. We used to love doing it in cold weather because all these pass rushers in hooded sweatshirts and long sleeves and everything else, because they knew that if they did not stop the run, that they were going to be in for a long day.
And we go back to
I'm getting fired up.
I can tell. It's pumped up. I love it.
This.
Going back to the teaching for a second, I think this is interesting too. He talked about having players understand the concepts and the why of what they're doing things. And a lot of people talk about the newer generations, whether it's millennials or you're talking about the generation after that, Generation Z, I believe it's called. You know, they want to be told why they're supposed to do something.
Yeah.
And he said, look, that's great to have them understand it, but he also made the point, I thought this was most interesting to me. If the players understand the why and how it's supposed to look once you get there.
You don't try to do anything outside of what you need to do.
And when you have to make an adjustment or a change in the heat of the moment, in the middle of a game, in the action, and you understand the why and the concept behind it, it's a lot easier to make that adjustment because you're not just doing what you're told, you're doing what you're told for a reason.
Exactly. Like, let's say for an offensive line, you're going up against a team and all of a sudden, you're going up against a defense that shows 2 on one side, but usually they're faking it and bring it from the other. Well, we're going to have this protection set up for it, but we're also going to have a screen dialed up as an alert into it. Why are we doing that? Because we feel like we can outnumber them away from the side that they're faking the blitz, or where they don't have numbers, where we can get offensive linemen in front blocking up against corners and safeties. That's why you have that check lined up into there. So those are things and descriptions of why you have these, instead of just saying, well, if they show us this look up against blitz, we're just going to check, and not give the full description of why you're trying to outnumber those players. So that's definitely an aspect that you think about, and that's definitely something that changes the dynamic of how players play on the field. Because if I know what I'm supposed to do, and you know what you're supposed to do, and we know together, if now all of a sudden the offense or the defense makes a shift, you and I don't have to sit there and look at each other. What are we going to do? You're both accountable, and you know right away, based upon that call of that defense, individually what you have to do, so you're not trying to do his job and he's not trying to do yours.
Here's the thing that got me most excited, and I guess I'm burying the lead, but this got me pumped up. It got me pumped up, I'm not going to lie, because look, and this is not to be meant as a negative to the last two guys that were here, but the last two guys that were here had offensive systems, right?
Yeah.
They're West Coast offense guys, and that's just the way it is. And Andy Reid's a West Coast offense guy. He's adjusted it a bit over the course of his career, and you can have a lot of success playing that way in the NFL.
Yeah.
And I'm not taking anything away from him. But when I heard Joe Judge, when he was asked about what system do you want to play in offense? What system do you want to play in defense? Are you 3-4? Are you 4-3?
We got to be versatile.
And he talked about personnel and schematic versatility. And we'll start on the personnel side first, Dave, because I will get to the schematic in a second. And he talked about having players that can play different schemes. If you have a defense, a team that you're playing, it's advantageous to play a 3-4 one week and then a 4-3 the next. That's what you do. And you need versatile players that are able, to our point, understand the concept so you can do multiple things. And it was just so refreshing that he's not going to try to, shoehorn players into positions where they can't succeed just to match a system.
Yeah, you're not getting pigeonholed.
But also just be flexible in how you use guys to maximize your chances to win on an individual week.
I love that, because you said it the best. When you sit there and you're looking at a 4-3 one week and a 3-4 the opposite week, you better have different personnel groupings. You better have different runs diagnosed to where you're doing stuff up against a 3-4. You want to attack those double bubble of an uncovered guard.
Right.
When you're going up against a 4-3 and now all of a sudden they've got a 3 technique and a 1 technique, now all of a sudden you want to hit the perimeter to the 1 technique side and the 5, because now all of a sudden you can gash in their space to pull or work up to the Mike linebacker and to where the tight end can edge the defense at the defensive end position. Those are all things that work tremendously when you're talking about an offense or a defense like you talked about. Going to 3-4 one week if they have a disadvantage and they really aren't good at running the inside zone scheme, or you can go 4-3. But once again, when you're allowed to change fundamentally and schematically, it allows you to get people in the right positions to play at their best of their ability. But two, it gives you the ability to in-game adjust and adapt to the play calling of the other side. Super Bowl 46, first half of that game up against the New England Patriots, they're running a 3-4 scheme. They thought that they were going to be able to stop the run up against it. We started getting the run game going. We started getting play action passing going. Going at halftime, we start making adjustments. We came out in the second half of that Super Bowl 46. They changed completely systematically to a 4-3 stack.
Wow, is that true?
That is 100% true. They completely changed philosophies defensively. And if you're not a smart, sharp veteran offense that can make that adjustment at halftime to get ready for the second half, Bill Belichick and that defense own you. They have you down. And those are things that in the heat of the moment when something's not working, and if your defense or your offense can revert and do something completely different, now you've got the other team on the ropes.
And doesn't that make it impossible for another team to prepare for you? If you're an amoeba week to week based on who you're playing, How is that other team going to go watch tape leading into the week and know what you're going to do? And he talked about it. You got to make the opponent prepare for a lot of different things. They can't know what you're going to do, and this seems to lend to that.
Another full opportunity to explain that. 2004, we play at Baltimore, and that's when Rex Ryan's defense is absolutely rolling. It's Eli Manning's second start. Practice all week.
Not a great situation for a quarterback.
No. Going up against their defense. We go to Baltimore. They ran a 3-4 hybrid that they haven't run in 5 years for that game.
Wow, really?
They ran a completely different scheme that we didn't even see film on or touch going into that game. Our first third down, Eli walks up and is going, Ray Lewis, 52's the mic, 52's the mic. Ed Reed runs up, no, 20's the mic, 20's the mic. And he's going, no, 52's the mic. They're saying this in between the cadence and in between the huddle, pointing at each other in the A and B gaps, moving back and forth, while their defensive line are shifting at the same time. So Eli's doing this. He's pointing from one side to the other. They're going, look it, they're all messed up. They're all messed up. Those are the types of things that if you can be versatile, you can catch teams on their back heels and they don't know how to adjust to it. To say the least, it was a rough day. I did get a tackle on Deion Sanders on an interception by Ed Reed that he did flip to Ed Reed.
You tackled Deion?
Ed Reed had an interception, flipped it to Deion. At that time, I was playing right tackle, had the perfect angle, head on a swivel to make sure I didn't get cleaned up by a linebacker of a defensive tackle. I tackled Deion Sanders. Come on, baby, you got to let me score on that one. You got to let me score. Because if he ran by me, I was the last line of defense.
Was that the only tackle of your career?
No. Unfortunately, I think I had 11 or 12 in my career.
Did you really?
Yeah.
That's a lot of tackles.
Yeah, that's not a good thing.
No, not good at all. The other thing that I love, too, and he talked about the offensive side of the ball with this. He goes, and this goes back again to schematic and, I think, game plan, tactical versatility rather than strategic. This is more tactical. He goes, 1 week, depending on the opponent, we might run it 37 times.
Yeah.
The next week, depending on the opponent, we might throw it 50 times.
Yeah.
And that, again, it's the game planning from week to week based on your opponent.
Yeah.
And
how do we magnify our strengths to expose the opponent's weaknesses?
And that was a Tom Coughlin and Kevin Gilbride staple.
Completely, because that's the thing that we would go in, especially on that Wednesday and that evaluation, and when we'd sit there and break down, and Coach Gilbride would come up in front of the room. Okay, we need to stop this player first because he's the guy who gets everything going. And look at what they do off of it. And they would show plays and they would show schemes, how this one player would magnify the other things of the other players. But if you took him out, now all of a sudden there's a weakness over here, there's a weakness over there. Those are things that you have to know as a coordinator to be able to make those adjustments and to make sure that your staff and your team know exactly what you need to do to come out with the result that you need. Because every once in a while, you get into a game, there's a big team like a Greg Williams defense. He's going to have a lot of exotic stuff, but there's always something that we would say the Baskin Robbins. What's the flavor of the day? There's always one blitz that's always going to come up because they feel that's their way to expose your offense. And if you know that and you can calculate it and have the alerts and adjustments off of it, that's a big home run play for you offensively.
And I think when you take a look at it and what gets you excited is the type of player and coaches that are necessary to execute that type of scheme. Because it can't just be anybody.
No, it can't be. You have to have the determination and the confidence that you bring a staff around that's going to be able to build, grow, and teach them the fundamentals of what they need to do, play in and play out with the scheme and what they're calling. And like we said, the why. Why are we calling this? What is the reason of what we're doing this in the overall picture of the way that we're trying to expose this offense or a defense? And when you can do that and you can convey it to the rest of the group and you do it with confidence, that's where I love when he said, we're going to study it. We're going to go out and practice it. We're going to go back into the room and study it again and make the corrections. And we're going to go back through and walk through and practice it again so that on Sunday, there is no excuses. There's no need to sit there and say, well, we didn't make that correction. They're going to know come Sunday how to play fast, furious, downhill football because they're not going to have any of those thoughts in their mind.
And the good thing is that we heard a lot of Belichickian type of stuff.
Yeah.
A lot of it. But we didn't hear a lot of the buzzwords. We didn't hear do your job.
No.
He regarded it a little bit, but he didn't use that frame. He didn't use, those sort of terms.
You could tell that he was influenced by Belichick and Saban, but that's not him.
Right, and that was going to be my point. From a personality perspective, a lot of the criticism we've heard about some of these guys on the Belichick tree that have not succeeded is that they show up and try to be Bill Belichick, not just as a tactician and a strategist, but as a person and as a personality. And you can't try to be somebody you're not.
No.
And this guy's not going to do that.
Because if you try to do that, people will see right through it. We've always said in the locker room, if you're not a loud, outspoken guy all the time or a rah-rah guy, don't be that guy, because now all of a sudden, if in the heat of the battle, then you're just all of a sudden do it, people see right through it because they know that's genuine, not being genuine in who you are. And that was the thing that you can say about him yesterday when they asked him that question about Nick Saban and Bill Belichick. He goes, I learned this from Nick Saban, I learned this from Bill Belichick, but I can't be them. I have to be myself. I'm comfortable and confident in my own skin, because if you're not, if you try to be anything other than that, people aren't going to believe you. People aren't going to see it. They're going to see right through you, and they're not going to take your intentions as the right thing to do.
Now, Dave, it's easy to win the press conference.
Yeah.
I've been around a lot of New York Knicks press conferences that look great.
So have I. You know me, I'm a Knicks fan too. So.
And then you start playing basketball and everything falls apart.
Yeah.
So in order to get to the wins in September, when everything starts to count and starts to matter, right? I love his approach and he used the word process, where it just is every day, get a little bit better, accomplish your task, and then move on to the next thing. But that's really the only way you can do that. The Giants have had 3 really bad years.
Yeah.
To turn it into something good, it's not something that's going to happen just because you say a few words and you flip a few switches,
and it
make
doesn't
a few
happen
changes.
overnight. Yep.
No, it's going to take that daily grind to just focus on your job that day, get it done, accomplish your goal, and just move on to the next.
That's like we talked about potential. Potential needs progress to hit productivity. It's with any football team. You need each and every day and each and every week your group to make progress, especially when we're talking about a young first and second year team like this New York Giants team is. I mean, think about it. I don't think ever in my career in 11 seasons that I would be able to look at the defensive line room where the oldest guy in there was 26, like Leonard Williams this last year. But with that being said, you have a young, energetic group that doesn't have their techniques and fundamentals honed in that muscle memory, that's all they can do because they're still young in the process. So being able to adapt and adjust and being able to transition them into where they need to go, it's going to start day one from the minute that they get here in the offseason, start doing their workouts, start running together, and then when they get out on the football field, it's a process of doing it that way day in and day out. Coach Coughlin, his thing is, if you're firm with me, if you're strict with me, I will put the world at your feet. If you're easy with me, if you take me lackadaisical and you don't take me serious, I will destroy you. Who am I? I am habit. Your habits, your daily rituals, the way that you go through things. If you have a habit of doing things the right way every single day and making progress, it comes out on the football field. If you're easy with those things, when times get tough, you revert back to your old ways that don't win football games.
Do you buy it? It's still all about fundamentals?
Absolutely. When you sit here and you watch the playoff games, it's about running the football, it's about tackling, and it's being sound when time management comes into play. And that was another great thing that he hit on yesterday in his press conference.
Talk about that in terms of his time management.
Figure him as a special teams coach, he's got to know what's going on specifically with the offense and the defense, how much time he has groups to get in and out. He's got to be sitting there with the coordinator, whether it's offensive, defensive coordinator. As a head coach, that's going to be a huge benefit for him, seeing the fact that he's done that throughout his career, knowing time situations, when they should use a timeout, when they should take a delay a game, whether they should take a penalty. Those are all things that are going to help him as a head coach right now because he's had the experience of the time management aspect, both through an offense and a defensive lens.
All right, Dave, final thoughts, just in terms of anything we missed that you think is important. He's going to be the CEO. He's not going to run on the other side of the ball. We haven't talked much about that. So why don't we go there first before we say goodbye? Just in terms of how having a coach that oversees everything is different than having a coach that is more focused on one side of the ball for a team.
Well, when you think about it, you think about Matt Nagy as a head coach when he took over as the Chicago Bears. He's playing calls or calling the plays. What was his goal and objective? I've got to keep Vic Fangio in order for me to do my job. Sean McVay had on the other side of the ball Wade Phillips, so that the minute that they get off the field and Jared Goff comes off, he's got a tablet and he's sitting there over there looking at it. But when you do those things, you're taking away yourself from the momentum of the football game.
You lose your feel for
what's
everything,
taking
right?
out on the football field. And then all of a sudden now you're having problems with time management because you're lost in the flow of the game. Now having him as an overseer, having the ability like he has, time management-wise, communication-wise, X's and O's, and the way that you want to strategically attack a football team, being on the side where he's been special teams, playing with the offensive coordinator and the defensive coordinator, it's going to be an unbelievable experience for him to be able to come in and be an overseer. Now I'm excited about to see what type of coaching staff that he assembles for this team moving forward to put them in the right direction in the championship culture that we created.
Super important, you think, for him to get a coordinator with head coaching experience, or not a big deal?
Well, obviously he was asked about that yesterday, and he said, yeah, it's not something that's mandatory, but it's definitely something that he needs to have a support staff around him, that if he does not know something, that he has people that he can lean on to. So I think that it is important that whether it be a head coach or not, somebody that has NFL experience and knows what it takes to win football games in the NFL.
The other thing, like he said, he wants people to come into his office and be honest with him and disagree with him and tell him when he's wrong that he's wrong. He said, there might be a disagreement, there might be some yelling, but we're going to walk out of there and everyone's going to be better for it.
Well, the one thing that I will say is that when Coach Coughlin started the Leadership Council like he did with us in 2007, which I was a part of, and he started asking us questions and was more open, and we started giving him answers to the way that we wanted certain things with practice or the way that we wanted things to function, and it made sense to him. It was almost like, why didn't we talk about these things earlier? Because it's one thing to say, hey, my door's always open. Come and talk to me about it. It's another thing when you have the peers and the captains and the leaders of your football team having a full-out discussion about the way that you want things to go. And he'd say, I understand and it makes sense. If it doesn't work, Tom's coming back in to do it his way. But I will give you the benefit of the doubt as long as you bring the locker room along with you.
Right.
And that is a great thing to do with a football team.
All right, final thoughts, Dave. Anything that we missed or that you're super excited about with Joe Judge being the new Giants?
I was ready to punch somebody in the nose yesterday, so I'm excited about the direction. I'm very excited about Joe Judge and him being a head coach, the demeanor, his attitude, his confidence in the program. Like I said, I'm just excited to see how this coaching staff rounds up together and gets ready for the 2020 season.
My man.
Always a pleasure, Schmelke.
I'm David Diehl. He's David Diehl. I'm John Schmelk. Thanks for joining us on this edition of the Giants Huddle Podcast. We appreciate it. Again, you can find the Giants Huddle Podcast on Giants.com, the Giants mobile app, and all your favorite podcast platforms. Find the subscribe. If you're on Apple Podcasts, leave a positive review. And if you want to check out the other Giants podcasts, go to Giants.com/podcast. For David Diehl, I'm John Schmelk. We'll see you next time, everybody. Have a great weekend.
Hey Giants fans, Saquon Barkley here. You want to see more videos? Subscribe below.